voter. I know people are getting tired of the voting stuff. Believe me, I get it. I've been getting calls about voting and texts about voting. I am grateful that people are so eager and urgent. But one, I'm trying to figure out how the heck so many organizations have my number. Why don't y'all work together to make sure that you're not spamming people every 5 seconds? I feel like it's not only been the people in the US who have been saying it, it's also been people outside of the US, which when it gets to that level, it feels so weird, and I've been having like a weird conflict with it. My brain, I guess, is kind of thinking of I think as a Black person and then as a Black woman, I get that weird unsolicited advice and urging constantly. And so in my head, it's coming as, but to others, it doesn't feel or look like that. And I was talking to a friend, he's a white guy, and we were talking about it, and I was just like, how does he not understand? And then I was like, oh, that's why. And it's not to say like he's like the worst human being in the world, no. Depending on like kind of where your standing is in society, the way that some of this information can kind of be looked at and viewed very differently. So you keep telling me to go and do something, I'm going to do it. It's not that I'm not going to, I am going to do it. But it feels like you keep asking me to do something and ignoring the fact that it is not as easy for me to go and do it. A lot of people didn't fully understand the importance of federal and state and local elections. Now that people are understanding that, now they're going out and making sure that they voted. This is not what I was supposed to be doing today. People have been really upset with the way that a lot of more celebrities or elite politicians keep going and talking to people about voting. And they're kind of doing it in a way that is annoying, kind of snobby and elitist. When I used to work with food policy and food justice, I used to have to talk to people who were on the food lines about the policies that were going on because they didn't know. They're happy to come in and chime in. What you need to do is just talk to them like a human being and not like a number that you get to check off of your, oh yeah, they're gonna vote list. When people have been talking about it that I've been hearing, they've been like, oh well, they disappointed me. And so I had to work 10 times as harder to get things to help them because they didn't want to go out and da-da-da. It's like, no girl, they didn't know. You know why we didn't know? Because we have terrible civics lessons in schools. Be like, hey, the reason that you should be going to vote is because you got local and state and federal people who represent you and your interests and are supposed to represent you and your interests. And that goes all the way down to the policing in your town, to the way that your school budget is, all the way up to making laws to make sure federally on a whole federal national level that you can get what you need to get. You going and voting every year in those mid-elections that aren't just the presidential elections is so important because that means that you get to vote people in who locally are going to make sure that they represent your interests, in your state make sure that they represent your interests, and nationally make sure that they represent your interests. Like you could go to those school town halls and rip them to shreds. I've seen it. And I honestly have loved it because the issue was huge and they should have done better about it. And I'm not gonna come to you as a, well, you should be doing this because da-da-da-da. There are so many things that are integral to making sure that you can live life the way that you should be able to. So that's what voting is. This is not where I was expecting to take it, but I think I've just been very annoyed about a lot of things and coming to the realization of this is why I am so annoyed by it, because it feels like every other time I've been told as a woman, as a Black person, as a Black woman about things that I should or shouldn't do that I didn't ask you about. Are you going to acknowledge the fact that it's going to be incredibly difficult for me to do this? I'm going to stop yelling. So now that I've got that out of my system, we're going to talk about the red Mirage and what that means in terms of voting. So this topic is kind of a topic that can be really anxiety inducing. So if you don't want to watch this, I'm completely understandable of that. The red Mirage is actually a term that's coined by Republicans in the US. By Democrats, it's called a blue shift. This is happening due to the shift to mail-in ballots for this election, particularly since we're in a pandemic. Surveys show that 40% of ballots will be cast by mail. Those who are Democrats, that figure rises to 48%, and then for Republicans, it's about 23%. We're not talking about other people who are probably independents as well, so that might be something that's like a little bit different too. The mail-in ballots are usually counted after Election Day, but this might take even longer due to infrastructural changes in the US. It takes longer to count mail-in ballots, and in many states, ballots are still admissible if they are postmarked by Election Day but arrive later. This means that the partial results that might get reported on election night are not actually the true result. There isn't any voter fraud. With mail-in ballots, some of your faves who keep saying that vote by mail. So make it make sense. The data firm Hawkfish, which was founded by former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, they studied these scenarios and started to warn the public about what they call the red mirage. And then for full disclosure, Bloomberg supports Biden and Hawkfish is working for pro-Biden super PACs. And according to their analysis, it might seem like Trump will win on election night due to the in-person polls, but that doesn't reflect the millions of mail-in ballots that are still getting processed or haven't arrived. And the analysis assumes that states are new to this level of mail-in voting and will suffer from similar delays. Edward Foley, an election law expert and professor, has found that in Pennsylvania, the blue shift is very real. 22,000 votes were processed after Election Day, and they were mostly voting for Democratic candidates in the last 4 presidential elections. Seeing this number and then understanding what that might look like now in 2020 is really important. This also played out in the 2018 midterms in a Senate race in Arizona. Republican Martha McSally had a 15,403 vote lead on election night, but that turned into a 71,303 vote deficit as Democrat Kyrsten Sinema pulled ahead due to mail-in and provisional ballot. Voting by mail has been used in both Republican and Democratic-leaning states in the U.S. for decades and is actually the primary voting system in some states. I also want to say that there's towns that do vote by mail only, as we have talked about. I talked about that in the USPS video, so it's not like this is something that is new. Experts say cases of fraud are vanishingly rare, and any attempt would be likely detected. Hawkfish is trying to educate the public. The group is also trying to make sure that state and county election officials, news and social media organizations, and the courts think a bit more about waiting to blare the results. There's also a higher chance of mail-in ballots being rejected than in-person ballots, which is why it's incredibly important to make sure that you're reading the directions when you get your mail-in ballot. I left a link down below that can help you, at least I hope. So I'm going to have to remind myself, and I think we're all going to have to remind ourselves to not panic. If you need to, don't look at the news, kind of distract yourself with other things. I'm going to be going to bed early on November 3rd and ignoring everything, but I also probably have to drive down to vote and then come back up. So both presidential candidates and their respective parties are gathering lawyers and studying election law, particularly in swing states or battleground states, which I will list here, so they can be ready to take it to court if they need to. News networks like CNN are changing their approach for Election Day, which might be called Election Week. Some battleground or swing states like Florida and Arizona have a strong track record of quickly counting in mail-in ballots, so it's possible that news networks could project those states while waiting on slow results in other battleground states. So what can we do? So last month, the USPS sent letters to 46 states and Washington, D.C., warning that it could not guarantee that all mail-in ballots would be counted in time, which is like, thank you. Mail back your ballot as soon as you get it if you can. I think realistically October 17th was when you were supposed to deliver it. So if you are able to, I know sometimes it can be really difficult, but if you're able to, go to your county election office or look up online for your county and see where their drop boxes are for the mail ballots. I believe in California, I think Senate Republicans or something like that literally dropped off fake like drop boxes for mail-in ballots. Jesus. The California government had to literally tell them no, and they still left them. So check your website to make sure that you're going to the right mail-in ballots. Do not just trust a box that you see out in the street, because apparently we're doing that now. If you don't really want to do the mail-in ballot, you can always go to your local voting site and vote there if you feel more comfortable. You can always go and ask to fill out a provisional ballot. You can fill out if you are unsure if you're registered to vote in that county. If you previously were listed as a person who does absentee voting, or if you're not listed in the books, sometimes you can fill out a provisional ballot. ballot, but you cannot mail in a ballot and then go and fill out a provisional ballot. I believe that's how it works. And the way that you fill out provisional ballots, mail-in ballots, absentee ballots, they all depend on your state. Please look at that link because it's going to be really helpful to you. Wait a week before getting yourself used to whatever results are being given. Oh, my battery's dying. 1 second. I think my thoughts with the Red Mirage, but the Electoral College has always been a little confusing to completely understand for me. The Red Mirage is a little confusing because you do have to think about popular vote and then you have to think about the Electoral College vote, and you're like, okay, well, sis, which one? Take this as you will, but I do think it's important for people to not only be aware of something like this happening, but also to be aware of just voting in general and the validity and what that means to vote. I don't think people should delegitimize voting, but I do understand the frustration there, but I think you should still be voting. Voting is so incredibly important. Always vote in your local elections every year, I'm pretty sure, and overall, federally, nationally, and your vote and your voice matters so much. Keep educating people and talking to them about voting, but do it in a way that you are cognizant of who they are and their standing in this world, and do it in a way where you are still giving information to them and helping them to understand the importance of it, and not just asking them to vote and can they count on your vote today. I truly think the only reason I just was so annoyed by having them ask me constantly about if I'm voting today is literally because it just felt so cold and impersonal. And if you're gonna be asking people to do something as important as voting, you want them to feel personal. And I know sometimes you don't have time for that, but I think that's incredibly important. Tell them why. Explain to them why if they want the explanation. I've taken classes about voting and voter data and getting out the vote, and I feel like sometimes there is an ignorance of the person's status. There just needs to be a better job when we're talking about voting and political data. Next week, you're probably not going to get a video. I will see you all in about 2 weeks, and please keep yourself safe. Take time to care for yourself in these moments. I think I'm posting this on Dia de los Muertos, so happy Dia de los Muertos. My pronunciation just now was terrible. Happy, I think, Dia de los Angelitos today, but stay safe. Wear a mask, vote, be careful. Bye.